As far as Father Altman's statements, it's not really the statements themselves that I want to address here. It's more about the nature of what it means to be a Catholic in this confusing era in the church and what it says about the difficulties we're facing. So it's been interesting to look at the responses to Father Altman's recent video where he basically said to the whole world that unequivocally, in his opinion, Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, is not the Pope. And I'm not here to defend Father Altman's reasoning. I'm not here to throw stones at Father Altman either. Because I think that the most important issue that is illuminated by Father Altman's statements is not the theological opinion. There are plenty of people who are very smart, who appeal to the writings of saints and popes and things like that, who come to conclusions about the papacy that I wouldn't agree with. There are many shades of Sedevacantism, which means, if you're not aware, that the Sedevacantist, the seat is vacant, Sedevacante, there's no pope. There is everyone from the Sedevacantists who believe that there hasn't been a pope since Pius XII, some since John the 23rd, some believe it was John Paul II who lost his office, and obviously there are those who believe that because of problems with resignation and election, that it is Pope Benedict who was the last pope, and now there is a stream within Catholicism, like Father Altman's beliefs, that essentially Pope Francis was elected pope, or at least potentially was, but lost his office because of heresy. In this time of confusion, I don't really have any judgments for people based on what they come to. Sometimes I find it easiest to speak about these sorts of things by way of analogy. And if you're wondering, I am sitting in my daughter's bedroom, hence the girly dresses behind me. The church is like a family. It is a family in many ways. We have a father. We are related in some way through baptism, as if sort of we're related by blood. The Pope is the patriarch of this family, and, he has lots of children. The last 50, 60 years since the Second Vatican Council, in a most pronounced fashion after the council, but beforehand there were some difficulties. There has been something, there's been a father wound that has developed within the church. I'm not going to use the term abuse. I'm not going to call the popes abusive. I'm not going to compare them in that sort of very raw sense to legitimately abusive fathers in that active, violent way. But something like that has taken place, whether it be a neglectfulness, a mismanagement, an absenteeism, something where Dad, the Holy Father, has really just failed a lot. And perhaps you don't agree with that. Maybe you might think, well, look at St. John Paul the Great, someone you may revere very much. You might say, look at, Pope Paul VI did, Pope St. Paul VI did Humanae Vitae and things like that. And granted, it is the papacy. There have been some bright spots. Pope John Paul II did write very strongly against female ordination, and Humanae Vitae was very clear that contraception is not acceptable, and there have been some bright spots, of course. But even if you're one of those sort of moderate, kind of conservative Catholics, there are a lot of issues, really, really terrible issues with how things have gone under popes since the council. If you're going to tell me that Pope John Paul II was great for reasons X, Y, and Z, then you're going to have to tell me how he flip-flopped on altar girls, which has been a disaster. Girl altar boys is what they are. You're going to have to tell me about Assisi, and please don't give me the line about they were all just praying to their own gods. I mean, goodness gracious, imagine reading that in the Old Testament. Abraham stood beside the Canaanites and so forth, and don't worry, the Canaanite pagans were praying to their own, and Abraham was praying to God. It's just absurd. Please stop doing apologetics for it. It just makes it worse. There have been some major problems. A lot is to be said that in the last 50 years, the person who has caused the most motivation for the Vatican to excommunicate somebody was Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, which I don't believe was valid, by the way, and that's another story. Look at the rank and file heretics who just run your average parish. Goodness gracious, there have been some major problems, and the popes, whether they be nice men, whether they be charismatic figures, whatever, they have utterly failed in their jobs, and that is going to offend some people. And here's where we get back to this analogy of the family. When there's an issue with the father, especially, then of course there are going to be issues with the children. I'm going to try to speak about the different types of children in the church and the way that they respond and how the sort of issues with the fatherhood of the Pope manifests in the children. You see, if dad is subpar, anywhere from absentee to violent to whatever, the children react in different ways. The most common thing is if things get bad enough, the kids just leave and never talk to dad. That's what most Catholics have done since the Second Vatican Council. I mean, you can call it the new springtime as much as you want, but the new springtime has meant, I think, average at Mass attendance in the United States was close to 80% before the Second Vatican Council, and I think after it's close to 85% of Catholics don't go to Mass now. So, I mean, it's almost a complete reversal. That's what most kids do. Things get so bad, dad is so bad, the parents are so bad, the fathers are so bad, the marriage is so bad that they just don't even come to Thanksgiving anymore. That's the average Catholic nowadays, if we're being honest. And then there are those that try to stick around, and their reasoning is different. Their actions are different. There are those who pretend that nothing's wrong and try to adopt the mishaps. They try to explain, they try to adopt the errors of the father and explain that, no, this is actually how we're supposed to be. I'm glad dad is changing the way that we run this household. Obviously, it's not a good mentality because there's immorality. Dad is doing some bad things, letting some bad people come into the house, but they just tell themselves, there's no way this is bad. There's no way this is bad. We're just going to go with it and everything's fine. That's kind of like the liberal Catholic. They're the ones that are saying, oh, this is good. Dad should be changing the family. Dad should change the family. The Pope should change the church. We need this. Then there are those who are sort of more conservative. And these are the ones where they intrinsically recognize things are not hunky-dory. But because of this allegiance they have to their father, which is good, but it gets exalted to this place of untempered zeal where they put the father on a pedestal and blame everyone else around the father. They blame all the other children. They blame all his siblings. They blame all the cousins. They blame the mailman. The dad didn't do anything wrong. He didn't actually change the family. See, the liberals believe he did change family, and that's fine. The conservatives believe, no. If you really look hard enough, if there are any changes, none of it's his fault. It's all the other brothers. It's all the sisters. It's all the cousins. It's the mailman. It's the guy down the road. Blame them. It's their fault. Everything is great. You just have to try harder and just be more obedient to dad, who has never done anything wrong. That's kind of the way they look at it. And then there are what we might call, they come off as rebels, and they kind of go into two camps. On the one side, you have sort of the traditionalists. And these are the ones saying, listen, dad is our dad. He's our dad. I'm his son. Nothing can change that. But what he's doing is wrong. Most of my siblings have left because of the way he's acting. We don't talk to our family members anymore because of his problems here and there. It's a complete disaster. It is his fault. Objectively speaking, he's in charge. He's driving the ship. The ship is going off course. He's the one in charge. I mean, no one else is. I mean, we have to be honest. We'll recognize him as our dad. We'll pray for him as our dad. We will do what he asks us to do when he asks us to do things rightly. But we can't just blindly obey him, because if we do, our family is in greater danger if we do that. And as part of this sort of rebellious kind of traditionalist side, you also have those who, inspired by the same zeal to protect the traditions of the family, they also fall into this psychological disposition where they reverence the father pretty much in the same way as the conservatives do, but they have the temperament of the traditionalist. And therefore, they can't reconcile this idea that we should resist the father, because they also believe in their heart of hearts that it's impossible for the father to be the real father if he has to be resisted, because a real dad would never do that. I hope this is making sense. This is kind of what we're living through in the church right now. Obviously, I would say I would sympathize with the traditionalist, as I am, of course, one, but I also understand that Catholics are completely confused. And I understand that the way that people react to the crisis and the actions of the popes in the last few decades is going to largely be of temperament. It's going to be because of their temperament. Some are more apt to do this or that. But here's some things that need to happen right now in order for the family to be okay. We can't pretend there's no differences. I cannot agree with the conservative Catholics. I can't. They're just wrong. I can't believe that the liberals, they're just wrong. But I can do my best to try to respect them, pray for them, and love them insofar as it is possible. Same can be said about my more rebellious, traditionally minded brethren who have the zeal for the Father like the conservative, but have the spirit of the traditionalist, and they kind of smash together, and we get this conclusion that is common amongst arguments like those Father Altman has put forth. And those of you who are not traditionalists, you have to stop piling on people like Father Altman. I'm not patronizing Father Altman. Father Altman is an extremely intelligent man. I've had the pleasure of spending some time with him. He's a very successful lawyer before he was a priest. He's very smart. His reasoning is very sound insofar as the research he's done has led to a conclusion that he thinks is valid. You can't approach Father Altman's arguments with kid gloves, so to speak. And that's true with all Sedevacantist arguments. There are extremely strong arguments against it, but I'm just saying it's not like it's some sort of fly-by-night little opinion he woke up one morning with. He's thought about this thoroughly, and this is the conclusion he's come to. I don't agree with it. I won't promote the same opinion. But I'm also not going to say things like, Father Altman's left the church. I just can't bring myself to do that. I mean, there are conservative Catholics that if you really look in, and these are famous, apologists and stuff, and when you look at their theological ideas, they're basically modernists. I mean, seriously. I mean, their ideas in their writings, I mean, goodness, I found some, I'm researching for a book I'm writing, and I found some writings from some of these very well-known apologists, and I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, like Pius X would be rolling over in his grave if he saw this. And these are, but I believe these men are of goodwill. I do. The woundedness of the children of the Holy Father of the Catholic Church right now is extremely severe. Basically, I guess in the end, I'm just asking for people to have some charity for Father Altman, because like me and everyone else watching this, we all need charity from other Catholics, because all of us are probably wrong about something. If you get to the point where in this confusing time with this absenteeism, this neglect, this psychological abuse, let's call it that, from what has come out of Rome, this gaslighting the last few decades, and you turn around and start blaming your siblings for the problem, you've lost the plot. Again, we can attack ideas, but really, when we all stand before God at the end of our life, He is going to be very merciful for what Catholics are going through right now. This crisis is unprecedented. So please, have a little grace, have a little charity for Catholics of different opinions in this extremely difficult time. If somebody crosses the line on a personal level, if somebody espouses legitimately defined heresy, that's one thing. But this Catholics continually going after other Catholics, it has to stop. It's absurd. And it's going to damn more people to hell than being confused about the Pope, put it that way. Pray for Father Altman, and pray for all those who are basically condemning him to hell, not realizing the log in their own eyes.